Thank you all for joining us today. Michelle King, Robert King, Audra McDonald, Christine Baranski, thank you so much for joining us today. What a treat to get this chance to talk about season 5 of The Good Fight. What didn't happen in this season? The breakdown of Law and Order, lots of drama and plot twists for the core characters at the heart of this show. There was so much of an arc for all of the characters. They really had, each of the core characters had long journeys this season and were different people by the time the season ended. I'd love to just throw it out to the Kings or Christine and Audra. What do you think were the key themes that were really explored this year?
You know, so much of the season was impacted by January 6th. And that sense that the country was kind of cracking up, the people were in their own bubbles, left and right, red and blue, that they were creating their own sense of justice, their own legal system, and their own. And so the season to me was really, after the previously on episode, was really looking at a comical version that starts like Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, where a judge, not a judge, just normal guy decides to start a court in the back room of a Kinko's coffee shop. And people start realizing that's a good place to get your, law decided by this kind of judge played by Mandy Patinkin, and then becomes more and more fascist and more concerning, like in the movie Network, I think Christina was starting to say, Robert, you talk too much.
No, I was just going to say to that point about January 6th, I mean, it certainly had a tremendous fallout for Diane being married to a man who, works for the NRA, and then she discovers that he may have aided or abetted someone who broke into the Capitol, and she wants to defend her husband, and how she's so torn because she's such a woman of such high principles, but how do you get in bed with someone who, there's that huge chasm. And that was really interesting topography. I even had the pleasure of hallucinating that Ruth Bader Ginsburg would somehow help me out of that. And lo and behold, I got out of bed and there was Elaine May as Ruth Bader Ginsburg. So that was, if you want to know my highlight of the season, it was playing those scenes with Elaine, and of course with Gary, those passionate scenes about how could you, and you're crossing the line, and how do you make that marriage work, which is a metaphor for how do we make America work when we're so divided.
And then I think also everything going on between all the racial tension at the firm, especially after Adrian Bozeman leaves, and Liz is starting to be sort of, she and Diane had this dream of making it, a firm that was run by women, but some of the older partners are starting to push Liz to this place of thinking, this is a Black firm. It needs to be led by Black people. And so there's this racial tension starts to bubble up between Diane and Liz, which comes to quite a boiling point for the two of them. So much so that it then explodes in this, ridiculous thing of them being accused of being lovers, and so they go with it and pretend that they are, because we've got like a sort of a Fox News kind of person thinking and trying to out them as lovers, and so we run with it, but it's a way to sort of bring the two of them back together. And by the end of that season, they come to a really good place with each other, but it's a big change for Diane in terms of where she lives as a
and that too is a kind of metaphor. How do we live and work, and where are the boundaries, and where do we make the corrections, and how do we make things better? And I just love the bravery of the writing that we just went head on to a very tense scene between Liz and I, where she calls me out and I do some soul searching, and in the end I'm off to a vacation, and I say, no, I'm fine without the view, and I'll be fine. I like starting over. And yet we were friends. When she says, I missed you, Diane, there was this deep human connection that was transcendent of all of the other issues.
And at the
So-
same time, I think she realized too, and a lot of people are realizing just in the world today, that sometimes we definitely, to make up for things that have happened in the past in this country, people who have been in positions of power are stepping aside to make
Right.
space for those, who have been marginalized for all these years. And so I think Diane comes to a pretty great realization, that, this is something I can do to be a part of that,
Mhm,
and also, serve your own soul.
mhm.
One thing that makes that really resonate is that we see Diane wrestle with this all throughout the season. And you see her, this is the great writing, you see her try to convince herself that, no, I deserve this. And on a paper, she does deserve it. It's all, she's not trying to take something that should not be hers, but it's that question of your right versus what's right. My question for you, Robert and Michelle, is did you know as writers going in that Diane would make the decision to step back and not take the name partner and the more kind of elevated role that she had essentially earned?
I think we struggled with it in the writer's room throughout. How will Diane resolve this? Because it isn't easy. And it's interesting to see her do the wrong thing. A character we love and admire is not always right. And she wasn't always right throughout the season, and yet comes to a principled place, as Audra says. And yet there is that moment at the end of the season where you wonder, is she really willing to step back forever? Or is there still a part of her that thinks, maybe there's another act in here?
Well, the other interesting thing is, of course, Diane's point of view, as she got advice from none other than Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who said, can you do something for women? Then don't step down. So the issue was, I fought the good fight, breaking the glass ceiling to get where I was. So I felt, wait a minute, I am entitled, having worked this hard. So it was like, which way do I go with that? It wasn't just, a sense of entitlement. It was a sense of, wait, I really worked to get where I was, and I represent something in terms of a woman's struggle.
And Liz both recognize that, yes, there are battles that they are walking, with each other in, and then there's battles that they can't possibly understand about each other, and that's a lot of what's going on in this season. But the wonderful thing too about the way the characters have been written is, like you said, they don't always do the right thing. They don't always make the right decisions. You don't want to play just, either a goody two shoes or just a villain. These are three-dimensional characters with flaws and strengths and some, serious weaknesses and serious strengths. And you, as an actor, you want to be able to play all of that. That's more fulfilling.
That woman of principle comes out at the moment where she says she remembers that this firm took me in.
Yes, I
season
think-
1, when nobody else wanted to have anything to do with me.
Yes, I think that is such an important moment. Remember, Robert, we actually discussed that. I wanted an additional moment to say, the reason for this is you took me in when nobody else would. And that was the pilot. And that was Adrian saying, you're radioactive, but we will take you in. And they saved me. So I feel a sense of loyalty to this firm. And I think that was absolutely a turning point for Diane. Like she
I
wanted.
remember we wrote it with that in mind, right? You mentioned that, and then we wrote the scene with that in mind.
Yeah, it's a really important moment.
We're talking about the finale, of course, but Delroy Lindo, talk about, filling a screen and what a presence. What was that like for you to say goodbye to him in episode 1? That was one of those good fight-esque things, season, you turn in episode 1, you don't expect a major character to leave, but that's what you get.
I know from us, I was quite emotional because, when you usually do a goodbye characters, there's not a lot of drama built into the episode that is irrelevant to the goodbye itself. Mm-hmm. And it was such a heightened episode where I thought he did some of his best work over all the seasons. It was kind of amazing because the George Floyd video, his reaction there, you watch those dailies and it was just kind of, you watch with tears in your eyes, because not only were you getting his best performance, but you were losing. That was going to be his last performance.
And with so much, it was all COVID impacted, that, in a better world, we would have had an opportunity to say goodbye in a more leisurely fashion.
Mm.
And, and yet we and he made the best of, I think, the way he exited.
It was a beautiful exit too. Personally, for me and for Liz, the way that he sort of guided Liz into this position, this was someone who was her professor and then became her husband, then her ex-husband, and then all of a sudden they're working together again, and then they kind of fall in love and fall back out of. I mean, so just the whole sort of like circle with their relationship to the end, where he, guides her to this place of power and says, "All right, now take care of our baby, this firm. You have the power, and you must seize the power, and you must do the right thing moving forward." And the scene where there's no furniture left in his office and we're all on the floor. I loved that scene.
And not only that, I remember, I don't think it was scripted, where he kind of cuddles your face as he's.
Yeah, no, he just did that. Yeah.
It was very sweet, because it was like, oh, that's not expected, but it's exactly right.
Right.
And just in terms of for the company of the good fight, sometimes you take a key player out of a situation, things aren't quite the same. Were you at all nervous about, what the vibe or the feeling on set would be without that great big presence of Delroy?
Of course we were nervous. We would have been crazy not to be nervous to lose great actors like Cush or Delroy and wonder, okay, what does this look like moving forward? And I got to say, it looks pretty great. I mean, we have been very, very fortunate to have other actors join the ensemble that are spectacular. Charmaine Bingwa and Andre Brower. We have been very lucky.
Yeah, I think our worry, and I remember Christine and Audra mentioning this, there was a sense of the lack of an alpha male energy among the threesome with the loss of Delroy. And, a lot of it was seeing, could, Christine and Audra create that tension that was there with a threesome, which is why the racial argument between them is, I think, so strong.
What has it been like for you now? You've been on the show, going into your 5th season on the show. What has it been like for you to inhabit this character for so long? After your, many years on Broadway, where, many years with the character, but in a different narrative setting.
At the time when I first joined, it was sort of predetermined who Liz was, even though I originated Liz on The Good Wife for that one moment that she was in.
Right.
She was someone who was a bit lost at that point. And I think because the Kings are so collaborative, I feel like Liz has had serious growth. She's had, lots of, devastating things happen, like finding out that her father was a serial rapist and sexual harasser and all of that, and coming to terms with that and she was trying to step out of her father's shadow anyway, and then realizing that the shadow was much darker than she ever knew, and then having to be able to step out of that and then also save something that he had built and, save it, resurrect it, this firm and all of that. So
save it from his behavior.
And from
you
now
did
staying
beautifully back and see, yeah.
Yes, and so I think there's been good growth for Liz, and obviously lots of adventure. Liz, comes in, with an ex being Bozeman, and then gets divorced season 2, and then she's had lots of fun flings, and Liz is, she's had a whirlwind, and also I think she's fallen in love with Diane too. I think they've come to a really, they start out as acquaintances, then frenemies, then enemies. I think their relationship, Liz and Diane's relationship, has grown into something very strong, and it keeps being tested, and they keep landing on their feet, and you don't think that they will, but they land on their feet in terms of what their relationship is, and they realize the strength in their bond, which is, that's been fun.
As a longtime Diane Lockhart watcher, there's a way that Diane looks at people, and she looks at certain people as peers, and she looks at others as not peers, and you can tell by the way that she looks. But I'd ask the both of you, could you, since you both have had such varied experience in Broadway and film, what is it like? Episodic television is an endurance test. What is it like working in this form versus other other films or theater in terms of that commitment to the character, getting through that endurance test that is each season? Can you contrast what it's like to be on a TV series versus like on a hit Broadway show?
Well, I would say that this is as close as you could come to being in theater, even though you're in television. And the reason is we tell wonderful stories. Our characters are very well drawn. We have a repertory company of fabulous actors who play judges and lawyers and wonderful people who, inhabit our world and then go off at 6 o'clock to be part of their Broadway show. We just worked with an actor today who's in The Lion King. And there's always, and I really, credit Robert and Michelle in the writer's room to providing us with just such a security, because let's face it, in the theater is very difficult, but you have your play and you rehearse it and then you do it. And so there's a predictability in the theater, and often television and often film can be just batshit crazy where, oh my God, I haven't gotten a script and it's the night before shooting and we don't have it. And there can be a crazy atmosphere with television and, oh my God, I'm just compromising my work because I really don't know this material and I haven't worked. We have something that's really, I don't know, it just has been wonderfully, I'm not saying it's easy, but theater isn't easy either. But it's really like we put on this show and there's a wonderful equilibrium about it. God knows there are tough days or there are long days, but it's not a crazy show. It's the opposite of a crazy show. It's a really sane, integrated work environment.
And I think also the endurance is different in television. You have to be able to endure long days that start at, 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, and you have to, sit for hours and then all of a sudden be ready to go and then do it over and over and over and over and over again, from 75 different angles, and then sit for another 3 hours and then do it again. And whereas the endurance with theater is doing the same thing night after night after night after night after night, and having it have to be 100% every single time, night after night after night after night, for week after week after week, for some shows year after year. So there's a different sort of endurance that's involved.
Gotcha. Well, again, fans are happy that you all are in such good shape. But I think honestly, sort of stepping back in the big picture, I think what you've done so well throughout this incredible moment in history that we've all been living through, that we could sort of kind of track with the rise of Trump. But you really did. I think about the themes that you took on this season. You were probably, certainly well along in thinking about the season when the January 6, 2021 riot in the Capitol happened. So did you pivot? You've been exploring the themes of the breakdown of cultural norms and societal decorum very much throughout the series, but this year you really went for it in a way. You went for the idea of the Mandy Patinkin character that comes in later in the season that runs essentially a kangaroo court in his own home. And as crazy as that sounds, we all know, we see the stories in the little stories in the back of the newspaper, strange home justice, like it's scary what is going on out there. There's a kernel of truth into the motif that you put in the season. How did you in that moment of the shock after January 6th, how did you figure out how to make this into compelling drama that was never felt exploitive, or it felt like you were just finger on the pulse?
We have a writer's room that we've been with a lot of years. Not that many people leave us. When we get them, we grab on and hold on. And then maybe someone else will join. But we were all together for a lot of events. And one of the events we were together for was January 6th. And we'd already started building the year. And Oren Squire, who was the writer who came up with the judge who working out of a Kinko's, he pitched it and we thought it was a 1 episode thing. But then January 6th happened and it's like, no, it's not 1 episode. I think that.
So that was in your thoughts even before January 6th?
We were, but as a one-off. And then it was like it represented the balkanization of America, it seemed like, very well. Is that your memory too?
Yeah.
So I think we ran with it. Christine was here on the first episode of Good Fight, where it was supposed to be Hillary won. And then, she leaves the firm because the last glass ceiling was broken. And then I think with like shooting the 8th day or 9th day of the pilot, Trump won like a block away from where we were shooting. And then Michelle and I went back to the drawing board about how to start the year, because it felt like, okay, as bad as that might be for the world, it was really good for the show, and what Christine's character would be feeling at the beginning of the show.
And so that is what it's been throughout, is a writer's room responding to yet another disaster in the news and filtering it through these characters who fortunately are very politically aware and interested, because otherwise you don't tell these stories. It's only because the characters care deeply about what's going on that the writers are allowed to care.
If it were a drama about Cirque du Soleil, we wouldn't be going there, but it's lawyers who are very in tune to what's going on in the news and how it impacts their life too.
And I think, again, what this show does so well is it brings together all the cross currents of the prison industrial complex, the private prisons, private police forces. Robert, I saw you describe it as the slow creeping hands of fascism, which is utterly chilling. And also, you made it, the stuff of great drama. The season ends with a riot, but not in an utterly apocalyptic way, but in a heady way where our characters are trying to make sense of this insane world. And, as we've talked about for Diane Lockhart, the lack of the pillars of things that used to be the foundation and the guideposts that all, good, sane people followed. How would you say the portrayals and the writing has changed as we've, proceeded through these years now, even the post-Trump years, but we're still working this stuff out?
For us, we start insanity and move to absurdity over the course of the year. I mean, there was one year where Christine's character is microdosing, and her microdosing starts at a very kind of plain level and then moves to insanity. I do think one of the worries about fascism is fascists don't have a sense of humor. So we're only trying to protect what we do by trying to scare away fascism from America, because it won't be a blander, more worrisome place, more in tune with what Russia's going through now.
I just find it so interesting. When I began the Good Wife, and Diane was always the liberal feminist, the Emily's List, feminist, and all of these years, 13 years, and having a hallucination about seeking advice from Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And here we are with the possible reversal of Roe v. Wade. Who would have ever thought? And, to play a liberal feminist during this arc of history, like how, of course she's going insane. Of course it's mind-numbingly horrifying what is going on with gun violence and Roe v. Wade and women's rights. I mean, it's an agonizing topography, and yet we're writing about it. And Liz too. She is an enlightened woman, an enlightened Black woman, and so we wear this stuff on our skin. We read the news and we respond, and then we go in and we do shows that reflect it. So that's the challenge of it, is to remain sensitive and not turn off the news, or to remain sensitive to what's going on, so as to use all of that as actors, because our writers are in the writer's room saying, let's use this next horrifying event. And then we get up on a sound stage and
do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, but sometimes it's been therapeutic. I mean, there's been some stuff that the Kings have written, that I've gotten to say that is exactly what Audra's thinking.
Me too.
And so it's been wonderful to, I mean, it's crass to say to get paid to do it. But, I'm getting paid for therapy in some ways, that I'm getting to talk about what happens to Black voters and how they're disenfranchised, or we get to talk about, what white privilege is, and try to help people understand it, all that. I'm getting to say all those things, So in that sense, it's been very cathartic, scary, because they write a script sometimes and you go, oh, wow, we're going out there. That could never. And then 2 months later, it happens in real life. We're like,
The
what's
world-
going on? You know, they're a little too prescient.
Yeah.
Yeah, apologies about that. But it's been strange. I mean, it's a law show, whether one runs away from that or not. But as justice seems to be eluding us, it becomes harder on the characters, because how do you keep trying to bring the law to justice and there is no justice anymore? It's a challenge for the characters and the writing.
And of course, you know, the trait that was established on Good Wife has almost become a little more heightened on Good Fight. It is this crazy, wry, occasionally dark, but not too dark sense of humor. I mean, the characters, even Christine so much is as, you know, envisioning an RBG to come give her counsel in her, you know, in her dreams or in her hallucination is, you know, there's that is the liberal fantasy. A lot of women, I would put myself like, you know, some days you would just like RBG just to say, you got this. You know? So how are there sort of, and in the streaming realm, you all have taken animation flights of fantasy, music flights of fantasy. How do you, is there like a litmus test for what is too much of a flight of fantasy? How do you decide when you really go there with a special effects thing or something that is, you know, outside the space of, you know, the normal bounds of time and gravity?
When we hit it, we'll let you know.
I do.
We just seem to be pushing further and further.
I mean, you're always just like, well, what is the thing to propel the audience to some prize or some like sense of, and you're always trying to challenge the actors, like, you know, throwing music at them to sing in odd moments. It's just like, okay, I don't know what Audra's going to do with that, but I know it would be great. Or Audra singing like a lullaby to Delroy, who's got a gunshot. And, you know, it's always, all right, how are the actors going to get out of this one? It's a little Perils of Pauline with the comedy, because you're always, okay, going from tragedy to comedy, and how are the actors going to handle it?
Absolutely, the stuff that without Baranski and McDonald and actors of that caliber would fall so flat. As great as you write it, it's such a high wire act with your actors to pull it off. I know better than to ask you a ton of spoilers about season 6, but any kernels, anything you can give us now that we're just learned that the season 6 will premiere on Paramount Plus on September 8th. Any kernels you can give the fans who will be waiting for the next couple of months?
Well, we have Andre Brower playing a part I've never seen him play. And I got to tell you, we haven't cut any of it together, but at least from the dailies, he makes me laugh all the time. I mean, it's just kind of a very odd role. And then John Slattery kind of playing, he's often played smarmy, and here he seems like a very genuine, I mean, he's playing it in a very different key than others. But Christine, Audra, do you have,
All you have to do is watch the news and then you'll know.
I have to say, Andre joining our cast this year has been such a joy. He's so much fun to play with. I mean, he's just another great actor to bring into this company. And it's just been such a joy getting to know him and that character he's playing. I like the dynamic it's bringing to the law firm.
And then we have Alan coming. I mean, what a
Eli Gold is back.
Alan, a breath of fresh air. He's more like a tornado or a hurricane of fresh air. But it's so wonderful to watch him, you know, with Sarah. It's such a marvelous relationship. And I think they just do fantastic work in the first part of the series.
and we were very aware whenever we had Alan coming on as Eli Gold in Good Wife, he didn't swear because you couldn't swear on network. So it's like, oh, this is the way he really talks. You know, on stream, it was like, oh yeah, his first word I think is motherfucker. You know, it's kind of like, yeah, okay, that's right, that's just, and yeah, so that, and then having Carrie Preston back as Elizabeth Tassioni is a lot of fun. I think we're returning to some old favorites because, you know, you're always seeing what chemicals you could put together and what creates an explosion, and those are what you do with the actors.
Are there any, I know I'm pushing my luck here, but any good fight or good wife characters from the past that we might see in season 6?
I think Alan Cumming would be the biggest. I mean, we definitely wanted him for years. I don't, we're not done shooting, so we can't say. I'm not saying that, I don't want to suggest that we have someone in mind, but it's always kind of weird when you say never, it never ends, and you get someone you don't expect.
Well, thank you all so much for taking the time to talk and talk a little bit about season 5, give us a little preview of what's to come, and just allow me to once again say thank you for a show that truly, I think, was sent to help us get through this very, very difficult time in our culture. It is one of those respites that I think for so many, as you said, Audrey and Christine, sometimes that speaking those words are probably very cathartic, just as it is to watch. Thank you all so much. Can't wait to see what you cook up for season 6.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Bye.